Okay, now I'm going to share. There we go. Okay, awesome. Okay, so we're going to talk about the personal statement for application to professional school, whether that's medical school, PA school, PT programs, things like that, and kind of give an overview of how to write your personal statement and just some tips on how to get started. Some things, I actually give a list of the top 10 tips based on different resources that I've researched, and then also some red flags and things you should definitely avoid when writing your personal statement. And so let's get started. So first, how to get started writing. Maybe you're having writer's block and you just don't even really know where to begin. And so with that, I would say it's really important to free write. Question, Robin, are you seeing this slide that says getting started with the orange on the top?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Great. Okay, awesome. So one is just to free write. So start thinking about, I'm going to give you some prompts in just a moment on some questions that you want to start thinking about how to answer. But why do you want to be a fill in the blank? So why do you want to be a doctor? Maybe that's that top question that you should think about answering, and wherever that comes from for you, start free writing a few pages and see what comes up. Sometimes exploring ideas through just free writing can kind of give you an idea of the direction that you should go. So the next thing I would say is that you can also have multiple drafts. So once you start free writing, maybe make a couple of different drafts, and you really never know what is going to come up. And then you can always cut those down. But always having kind of one draft with everything can help you, because you'll probably need more information when it comes to other questions, or maybe something comes up in an interview and you did not talk about it in your personal statement. Sometimes you want to save some things for potentially talking about in an interview. And so having multiple drafts can help. And just don't limit yourself to just having one draft. Another thing I would say is allow yourself a lot of time. Sometimes writer's block is a real thing. And so if you allow yourself enough time, then you'll be able to come back to it at a later time to resurface some of those thoughts. And then the last thing I would say is, if you haven't started already, starting a journal to document your experiences, logging hours, and then when you're journaling, start thinking about not only how it impacted you, but also what was the environment like. How did it make you feel? Who was in the room? What was the location? Things like that, because a big part of your personal statement should be storytelling. If you can imagine that these admission committees are reading hundreds of personal statements. And so sometimes the things that jump out are the stories that make them feel a certain way, and they'll want to continue reading and feel more invested in your personal statement. These are some other kind of prompts that can help you in getting started, and some of the questions that you should consider. Why do you want to be a blank? Obviously, that's probably the top thing that you're really wanting to answer in your personal statement, but also who's been influential in your life? Why have they been influential? What are some of their characteristics or attributes? Why are you passionate about the path you want to take? Think about some of those pivotal moments in your life, even from a really young age. Sometimes those things happen early on in your life. And so being able to talk about those and also being really vulnerable can help in your personal statement. Top 5 things that you want someone to know about you. Those are important too, and that doesn't just apply to your personal statement, but also thinking about all the work experience prompts that you'll have in the actual application, your primary application. You'll have to write about things. So what do you want them to know about you? How do you positively impact your fellow students and your community? How do you learn from adversity? What are important issues faced in the medical profession? These are just some prompts to help you kind of start brainstorming and start thinking about what you want to say. You can absolutely take screenshots of these as well, but it is being recorded and it will be posted. So if you want to look back on it at any time, you'll be able to do that. So then I would say when it comes to the actual formatting of your personal statement, you can always find that the 5-point essay format is a tried and true format for writing. And so if you're kind of all over the place with paragraphs, you don't have a good flow, embracing the 5-point essay format can really help you get your thoughts and the points you want to make organized. Typically, you have a first paragraph that's going to be something that's going to catch the reader's attention. Maybe it's a story. You definitely want to have some introduction in there. And then sometimes a thesis statement can really help. A thesis statement is essentially where you're going to kind of summarize what you want what the reader is going to be reading as they continue on to the next paragraph. So maybe there are two main things or experiences that you want to highlight. And so you'll kind of mention those in a thesis statement, and that goes into that first paragraph. Then as they continue reading, they know what to expect with the body paragraphs. The body paragraphs, you're going to use these to reveal a little bit more about who you are and elaborate more on that thesis statement if you have one. And ideally, one of these paragraphs kind of reflect your main purpose and driving picture of why you want to be a blank. And then in your concluding paragraph, this is having a strong conclusion. It can kind of go back and circle back to some of the points that you made and kind of give a brief summary of what you were trying to get across in your personal statement. So now I'm going to kind of go into some top tips. I'm going to try to go quickly so that we have some time if there are any questions. But I would say these top 10 tips are really just based on all of the research I've done on these personal statements and what medical school admissions would like for you to know. So the first one is that good writing is simple writing. And so staying on topic, being very clear in your writing, not using a lot of fluff words, and being very direct and using direct language, because you don't want them to have to struggle to comprehend what it is that you're trying to convey. Staying on topic is another part of that. You don't want to ramble too much about any one thing. So like maybe you want to introduce someone in your life who's been impactful. You don't want an entire paragraph about that one person. You really want to stay on topic because this is a document about you. So you can talk about that person, mention them about how they were impactful for you, but then also what you've taken away from that. Don't spend too much time on something other than you and your entire point that you're trying to make. Another thing you can think about is kind of using a theme that you can weave throughout that can help kind of make the entire personal statement really cohesive. And then your personal statement is also a way for you to provide like additional and in-depth information that they're not going to have in the application itself. But good writing is simple writing. And so if you're reading through, a first draft and you find sentences that you're like, I don't really need this sentence. This sentence is maybe it's really obvious. Take it out. Keep it simple. That's going to help the admissions committee in reading it, and it's going to help you as a writer because this is essentially a writing sample as well. So the second tip I would say is to stay focused. And I mentioned that in the last one as well. You want your personal statement to highlight really interesting aspects of your journey, but you don't want to really tell your entire life story. So staying focused is gonna help you again, not only in keeping it simple, short and simple, but you can support things using examples. And again, I'm going to say fluff words a lot in this, but that might be just like over explaining something. Or maybe you're kind of using, and I'm going to talk about cliches as well, but maybe fluff is a lot of like, I really want to help people, and this has been so impactful, and I'm very dedicated, and some of these things that they're already going to hopefully see through the examples that you give. You don't necessarily have to state it very explicitly, but stay focused. That's the second tip I would say. And these all kind of relate to each other. And the next one is going to be show, don't tell. So rather than telling the admissions committee about all of these great qualities that you have, whether you want to help people, you're compassionate, you're empathetic, whatever that looks like for you, show them. So show them through the stories about who you are and the things that have been impactful to you, the things that you've pursued. Those are going to exemplify your traits. And so you don't want to just say it, you want to prove it. And I'm trying to think if I have anything more on this slide. Oh, again, so you don't want to be competing with things that you already have in your application. So in your application, you're going to have to write about 15 different experiences and stating your 3 as being the most impactful experiences for you. This isn't the time to like basically repeat what you've already written in your primary applications in your personal statement. They don't want a lot of repetition. They've seen those work experiences, but your personal statement is a way to really go in depth with impactful things that have made you sure this is the path you want to take, and to get to know you in a deeper way. You might have an experience in your application that you want to highlight or go into more deeply in your personal statement, and that's okay. But again, you want to show and not just tell them why it was impactful, but showcase that about yourself. So I would say back off the cliches too. This is something they're going to see across the board. And while all of it may be true, it's not exactly something that you want to be the highlight of your personal statement. So you love science. That's definitely a great reason to go into the healthcare field, especially as, because all your prereqs are very science heavy. But loving science probably is going to showcase in your GPA. If you're a competitive applicant, and they're going to see your transcripts, they're going to see the grades that you've made. You want to help people. That is very sincere, and maybe that is absolutely the only reason that you want to go into healthcare. But that's what everyone else is saying. It's very cliche. So instead, be really personable, be specific, showcasing, again, show, don't tell. You want to help people, but here's how I already have. And this was a really impactful moment from that one time that I was a volunteer and helped people in my community, or whatever that looks like for you. How have you had experiences that have convinced you that this is the path for you, and how can you convince them as well? But it's likely that you're going to want to say things like this in your personal statement, and maybe you will, and that's okay. But you don't want this to be the driving factor. You don't want to over repeat yourself throughout your personal statement, and just show, don't tell again, and try to avoid these cliches. So find your unique angle. So what can you say about yourself that no one else can? So remember that everyone is really unique. While let's say that there are 2 candidates and you've had literally the exact same experiences. You were both, a CNA, you were both a volunteer for a specific place. The differences, the experiences may all be the same, but what you've taken out of those experiences, how those experiences have impacted you, how those experiences have changed you, those are what differentiate you. So what's really unique about how you've reacted to the experiences that you've had? It's also important too, with having a unique angle, to also use your voice. So this is actually something that I heard recently about a personal statement that they pieced together as in kind of a robotic way. They wrote exactly what they thought the admissions committees wanted to hear. And it really wasn't in their voice. They weren't reflecting on who they were. And so they got to an interview stage, and the way that they came across in an interview sounded nothing like their personal statement. And that's kind of a red flag for admission committees. So write in your voice, bring you into your personal statement. For all the people just joining us, hi, I'm Sarah, I'm the pre-health career coach, and we're kind of going through this presentation pretty quickly, but I do want to share that this is being recorded and it is going to be shared on our website, and I will make sure you have the link to this when we are finished. So yeah, bringing your own voice and your own perspective can make it memorable to the admissions committee. So the next thing I would say is you want to be interesting. Now, this can be really hard for a lot of students, is how do you start with a catch? How can you have intrigue in your personal statement? You want the admissions committee to be interested in what you're saying, but you don't want to be boring. You don't want to be just like everybody else. And so I think that the best way you can do this is through storytelling. And so think about the stories that you have that only you have experienced. And you can really dive into those stories and talk about the environment, set the scene, be descriptive in your writing. And you're kind of going to tell a story based on your own experiences. Can you also think about a theme that you can weave throughout? Like maybe there's a metaphor. I recently met with a student who plays guitar and teaches kids how to play guitar. And so we talked a little bit about using, their interest in music as kind of a theme that they wove throughout their personal essay. And it actually turned out really well, because they talked about how you're using the strings, and sometimes that's painful, but it's also similar when you're being trained in the healthcare, experiences, and you're kind of being thrown into that world. And they had a really good way of connecting the two. Now that makes it very interesting, because you wouldn't typically think that relates at all, but can you relate maybe an interest that you have outside of healthcare? Can you relate that to experiences that you've had and the impact that it's had on you in wanting to go into this profession? So just something to think about. I think another thing that you can also do that can be interesting is integrate current issues that are actually happening in the field or the specialty that you're interested in. Having that knowledge of what's actually going on. And then can you also integrate some of your future goals? Like, let's say you do become, a physician in this specific field that you want to go into. What kind of changes do you want to make? How do you want to show up? How do you want to make a difference? If you can kind of, even if it's just in a short few sentences, that actually can be very interesting to add to your personal statement. If you ever have an opportunity to showcase ethics, that's another kind of great thing that you can put into your personal statement. And then I would also say, I have some notes over here, but one thing too that I don't know if I have it in here, maybe I should have put this in the beginning, is to avoid using I. So you're obviously talking about yourself and you're going to use I, but if you have too much of every sentence starting with I, you might want to think about how you can restructure those sentences. That doesn't necessarily apply to this slide, but it is an important point that I have in my notes over here. So sorry, my phone is ringing. Okay, so the next one is going to be being thoughtful about your transitions. So again, we talked about the 5-point essay format. For those of you who just joined and missed that slide, we talked about the 5-point essay format, and I know you all have probably taken have already taken your writing course. But your 5-point essay format is essentially an introduction paragraph, you have your body paragraphs, and you have a conclusion paragraph. But you want to have transitions between those, because that just really makes it a cohesive personal statement. It's one document. It's about you. And so how can you kind of make those transitions seamless? You can vary your sentence structure, and you don't want your essay to be boring, but if you can make connections with the first paragraph and kind of lead it into the second paragraph, that actually looks really well. And like I said before, this document is not just talking about you and the impactful moments that make you know you want to be a fill in the blank. But it's also a writing sample. And so they're able to really see what kind of writer you are through your voice. And sometimes those transitions can be a factor. So the next one I would say is definitely stick to your word count. I've even heard from specific admissions committee members who've said, even if you can get your point across in your personal statement in less than the allotted characters, that's great because they're reading so many of these. And so definitely watch your word count. You don't even want to go one over. I also want to make note that these are characters, and that's actually not words. So it's not a 5,300 word essay. It is a 5,300 character essay. And typically all of these are going to include spaces. And so if you're all familiar with Microsoft Word, you know that you can go and find the word count. It will tell you words, but it's also going to show you the character count as well. So that's something to pay attention to. But you really need to stick to the rules here because they notice. And even if you can get in less characters, that'll benefit you as well. So double check the details. Obviously, I think this goes without saying. You do not want to submit a personal statement or honestly any area of your application that has errors, whether that's grammatical errors, spelling errors, punctuation errors. This is a sample of your writing skills. You want it to be clear, concise, simple, and you just don't want to have any errors that will have an immediate consequence. And so I will let you know too, and I think it's in the next slide, that we have an Excel Writing Center here, but also having other people proofread for you is going to help you. And I think that will just transition me into the next slide. Yes. So before you hit submit, have people that you trust who are going to be very honest with you to offer feedback. Now, if you have your best friend look at it for you and they read through it and they say, this looks great, it's perfect. That's not true. There are always things that can be critiqued. And so you want to find somebody that's going to be really honest about your personal statement. The Excel Writing Center is a great resource here on campus. I would say they probably don't know the specifics around what professional schools are wanting in these essays, but it's more, the Excel Writing Center can be really beneficial when it comes to looking at the grammar, the spelling, the punctuation, and your sentence structures and things like that. They can really give you some great feedback. Another thing I would say, and I always tell students this when I look at their personal essays, is that I am just one, I'm just one person looking at this, that take what I say with a grain of salt. This is your document after all. And if I say you should change this, this, and this, but you really, really believe that should stay, then that's what you should do. You should lean on your own intuition and understanding of yourself. And so when you're taking all of these, all the feedback that you're getting, don't change everything they're saying. I'd say have one that doesn't have any changes that you keep, and then take note of all the things that people are saying, and then make your best judgment at the end of the day. So this is kind of when we're looking at some of the red flags that the admissions committees do not want to see. And these are actually red flags that have come specifically from people I've talked to who've been on medical school admission committees. And so they see these things often in personal statements, and it's a big red flag. So the first is, you're really talking about why you want to go into a specific profession. You don't want one of your reasons to be that you want to make a lot of money. That may actually be very true and one of the biggest reasons that you want to go into that field, but that's not the time that you want to convey that in a personal statement or actually anywhere on your application. Another thing, and we talked about this in the tips, is you don't want to be too general or lack direction. You don't want to ramble. You don't want to tell them your whole life story. That's not what they're asking for. And so you don't want it to just be so broad that you're not really getting to a point. You want it to be strategic. Again, with using having an over I centered, while it absolutely is about you want to watch your wording. And I think there is a way that you can actually look and see, like go through your personal statement, maybe look at every I and highlight it in red. And if you have red all over the page, then that is meaning that you have I too often in your personal statement. So just watch out for that. Another thing too is be careful using medical terminology to try to convey that you know specific things. You're trying to get into a professional program. So if you're trying to convey how smart you are in your personal statement or in your application, why are you applying? They don't want an expert, right? So try not to come off as if you already know everything there is to know. You want to be really humble in your understanding, and that going into a healthcare profession, you're going to be a lifelong learner. And that's something that if you have the ability to convey that, whether that's in your personal statement or your interview, that's a good thing that you want them to know. They see your transcripts, they see your grades in your classes. They see some of the research you've done or some of the experiences that you've had. And so you're competitive in that regard. But when it comes to who you are and in your personal statement, that's not the time to showcase all the knowledge that you have. You don't want to be too self-congratulatory or too self-deprecating. So the two ends of the spectrum. You might have a really impactful experience where you potentially save someone's life. You don't want the first thing that you convey about that experience to be how great you felt, how rewarding it was for you, how you were so proud of what you did. That's kind of being too self-congratulatory. You also don't want to be self-deprecating. You don't want to talk about the things that you didn't do or the things that you don't know. But there's kind of a good middle ground. This is kind of a controversial point, but it is something that you should really recognize. And that is, you don't want to bring in viewpoints that are controversial, such as religion or politics or political affiliations. I want to talk about this a little bit more because I get this question a lot. So maybe religion and your spirituality is a huge part of who you are and a huge driving factor for you to why you want to go into this field. And that's okay. If you really feel like that's something you need to convey, then that's your choice and your decision. However, it is something that a person on an admission board might have an opinion about, and it could sway their decision on whether or not they want to give you an interview or put you into the next round. So you just need to be really careful about using religion or your spirituality in your personal statement. Politics is another one. I've gotten questions from students who might have been on a politically affiliated student organization, and maybe they were president of that. But rather you can convey that and say that you were the president of a political affiliated student organization without kind of signifying what area that was in or what political standpoint or viewpoint they have. You just want to be really careful here, because these are things that people can have opinions on that might sway their choice of putting you into the interview round, whether that's fair or not. And so I think the best practice is just to try to steer clear of going too detailed into these controversial topics or viewpoints. Another thing is you just don't want to be patronizing. These healthcare professionals who are on an admission board, they know more than any of us. And so you should really just try to be humble and not patronizing. And that kind of concludes the main points that I wanted to get across for you all. Like I said, this is going to be recorded, but there's also an entire document on some of the key points of how to formulate your personal statement. And I also know that there are always professional associations who who are giving workshops on the personal statement. I would encourage you to attend as many as possible, because they're all going to come at this topic from different angles. Definitely use our Career Center resources. If you go to career.uccs.edu, at the top, you'll see a drop-down menu for industry, and you'll go down to pre-health. That's going to give you, no matter what track you're on, it's going to give you so many resources, not just on your personal statement, but on community resources, your MCAT preparation. There are people who are just coming in. I'm so sorry, I'm just coming to the end of this presentation, but also the recordings are on here. So I had an entire semester of group sessions, and the majority of them were recorded and are posted. So there's a button at the top of this page where you can find recorded group sessions, and this one will be posted probably by the end of this week. So I'm going to stop sharing if I can figure out how. There we go. And I'll also stop recording.